That wasn't my grandfather calling my name from the tree line, because I'd just buried him 3 days ago, and the voice was coming from something that was trying way too hard to sound human. I should probably back up and explain how I ended up alone in the Colorado wilderness, 300 miles from the nearest town, listening to my dead grandfather's voice echoing through the pine trees at 2 in the morning. It all started with my boring job at the insurance company downtown. 40 hours a week of processing claims, sitting in a gray cubicle under fluorescent lights that made everyone look like corpses. After Grandpa Joe's funeral, I couldn't handle another minute of that place. Grandpa Joe had been my anchor, the only family member who understood my need to escape into nature. He taught me everything about wilderness, survival, tracking, reading the land. When the cancer took him, it felt like losing my compass. So I took my accumulated vacation time and headed to the remote cabin he'd left me in his will, a place I'd never even known existed. The drive took me deeper into the mountains than I'd ever been. Cell service died after the first 50 miles. GPS gave up after 100. But Grandpa's handwritten directions were perfect, leading me down increasingly narrow dirt roads until I reached a weathered log cabin sitting in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. Inside, everything was exactly as he'd left it. Hunting rifles mounted on the walls, shelves lined with survival guides and Native American folklore books. There was even a journal on the kitchen table, left open to an entry dated just 2 weeks before his death. "The watchers are getting bolder," it read. "Found 3 more sets of tracks circling the cabin last night. Not wolf, not bear, something else. Something that walks on 2 legs but leaves claw marks in the dirt. Need to be more careful. They're learning to mimic voices now." I laughed it off as the ramblings of a sick old man. Grandpa had always been fascinated by cryptid stories and Native American legends. The journal was probably just creative writing, his way of coping with the approaching end. That first day passed peacefully. I cleaned the cabin, organized supplies, took a short hike to get my bearings. The forest felt alive around me in ways the city never did. Birds calling, squirrels chattering, wind rustling through branches. It was exactly what I needed to clear my head and process my grief. But as darkness fell, the forest went silent. Not gradually, all at once, like someone had thrown a switch. The complete absence of sound was so unnerving I found myself holding my breath, straining to hear anything. Even the wind had stopped. That's when I heard Grandpa Joe's voice. Tommy, come outside, son. I need to show you something important." My blood froze. The voice was perfect. His exact inflection, the way he'd always called me son, even though I was his grandson. But there was something underneath it, something that made my skin crawl, like someone doing a really good impression but not quite getting it right. I grabbed one of Grandpa's rifles from the wall rack and crept to the window. The clearing was bathed in moonlight, empty except for shadows cast by the surrounding pines. But I could swear I saw movement at the forest edge, something tall and dark shifting between the trees. "Tommy, don't keep me waiting. You know how I hate when people are late." The voice came from a different direction now. Impossible. Unless whatever was making it had moved. Fast. I stayed inside, rifle ready, watching the windows until dawn. When the sun finally rose, the normal forest sounds returned gradually. Birds singing, insects buzzing. I convinced myself it had been stress and grief playing tricks on my mind. But when I stepped outside to check the perimeter, I found them. Footprints in the soft earth around the cabin. Human-shaped but wrong somehow. Too long, with what looked like claw marks at the tips of the toes. And there were dozens of them, circling the building over and over like something had paced around it all night. I should have left then. Should have packed up and driven straight back to the city. Instead, I spent the day reading Grandpa's journal from beginning to end. The entries went back 5 years, documenting increasingly strange encounters in these woods. Voices calling from empty clearings, glimpses of figures that moved wrong, too fluid and quick for human. Animals found torn apart in ways that suggested something much larger and stronger than any predator native to Colorado. And always, the same description. Tall, gaunt figures that seemed to shift between human and animal forms. That could mimic any voice perfectly, but never quite got the mannerisms right. That left tracks like broken paws, as if their feet were constantly changing shape. Grandpa had a name for them, borrowed from Navajo folklore he'd studied extensively. Skinwalkers, shape-shifting witches that had abandoned their humanity for dark power. By the third night, I was starting to believe him. The voices came earlier this time, just after sunset. Not just Grandpa Joe now. I heard my mother, my ex-girlfriend Sarah, even my old college roommate Jake, all calling my name, all trying to lure me outside with urgent requests for help. "Tommy, I'm hurt out here. Please, I need you, son. There's been an accident. Come quick. Thomas, I'm lost in the dark. I can see your light. I just come to the tree line." But the voices moved too fast, came from too many directions at once, and underneath each one was that same wrongness, like someone reading lines from a script they didn't quite understand. I barricaded the door and windows, then sat in the center of the cabin with the rifle across my knees. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The voices weren't just mimicking people I knew. They were getting better at it. When Grandpa Joe spoke again, he used a phrase I'd never told anyone about, something he'd said to me privately at my high school graduation. When Sarah called out, she mentioned a pet name she'd used that only we knew about. They were learning, getting inside my head somehow, pulling out memories and using them against me. The harassment continued for hours, voices calling from different directions, shadows moving past the windows, the sound of footsteps on the cabin roof, sometimes scratching at the walls, like claws trying to find a way in. Around 3 in the morning, everything went silent again. I waited, rifle ready, expecting another round of psychological torture. Instead, I heard something that made my blood run cold, my own voice, calling from outside. "Hello? Is anyone in there? I'm lost. My car broke down about a mile back. Please, I just need to use your phone." It was perfect. Exactly how I sounded, down to the slight nervousness I got when talking to strangers. If I hadn't been sitting inside the cabin, I would have believed it completely. Then I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate. Something was testing the door handle. "I know you're in there," my voice said, and now there was something hungry in it. "I can smell you. Smell your fear. Your grandfather tasted so good. I've been saving you for last." The handle turned. The door pushed against my barricade. I fired 3 shots through the wooden door, the rifle cracks deafening in the small space. Something screamed outside. Not human, not animal. A sound like tearing metal and breaking glass. Heavy footsteps stumbled across the porch and down the steps. Then, silence. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't move from my position until full daylight streamed through the windows. When I finally worked up the courage to check outside, I found dark stains on the porch boards. Not blood. Something thicker and fouler smelling. The trail led into the forest, but I wasn't brave enough to follow it. Instead, I packed everything I could carry and got the hell out of there. It took me 6 hours of hard driving on winding mountain roads before I hit cell service. The first thing I did was call the local sheriff's office and report what had happened. They promised to send someone to check the cabin, but warned me that the area had a history of strange incidents. Hikers going missing, campsites found destroyed, weird animal attacks that didn't match any known predator patterns. I never went back to that cabin. Sold it through a real estate agent without ever setting foot on the property again. But sometimes, on quiet nights in my city apartment, I still hear them calling, voices of people I know, people I love, begging me to come outside. And I remember what Grandpa Joe wrote in his final journal entry. They don't give up. Once they've marked you, once they know you're sent, they'll follow you anywhere. The only thing that keeps them at bay is light, fire, and the knowledge that they need permission to truly harm you. Don't ever give them that permission. Don't ever go to them willingly. I keep lights burning all night now. Motion sensors, security cameras, anything that might give me warning. Because I know they're still out there. Still calling my name. Still wearing the faces and voices of everyone I've ever cared about. And sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if that really was Grandpa Joe's voice I heard that first night. Or if they'd been wearing his face all along, even before he died. If you ever find yourself alone in deep woods and hear familiar voices calling from the darkness, remember this. The people who love you will never ask you to abandon safety to come to them. That's not love speaking. That's hunger. And if you liked this little tale of terror, maybe hit that like button and let me know what other dark corners of the wilderness you'd like me to explore. Sweet dreams, everyone. The scratching started on my second week working the night shift at the remote fire lookout tower, and it was coming from something that walked upright but had claws longer than any animal I'd ever seen. Let me explain how I ended up 90 feet above the forest floor in a glorified wooden box, miles from the nearest human being. After college, I couldn't find decent work in my field, so I took a seasonal job with the Forest Service. The pay was terrible, but it included housing and all the solitude a broke introvert could want. The Pine View Lookout sat on a mountain ridge deep in the Cascade Range, accessible only by a winding dirt road that took 2 hours to navigate. My job was simple: watch for smoke during fire season, radio and GPS coordinates if I spotted anything suspicious. 8 hours alone, with binoculars, weather instruments, and a two-way radio. Perfect for someone trying to escape the chaos of modern life. The tower itself was a classic fire lookout, a small cabin mounted on stilts with windows on all sides, giving me a 360 view of endless forest. During the day, it was beautiful. Rolling mountains covered in Douglas fir and pine, carved by deep valleys where mist collected like ghosts. At night, it became something else entirely. My predecessor had left behind a logbook documenting daily observations, weather patterns, and fire hazards. But scattered throughout the official entries were other notes, personal observations that grew increasingly disturbing as the season progressed. Day 43. Heard howling last night, but not from wolves. Too rhythmic, almost like chanting. Day 51. Something climbed halfway up the tower ladder around 3 a.m. Heavy footsteps on metal rungs, then silence. Found scratches in the morning but couldn't identify what made them. Day 62. They're learning to mimic radio chatter. Heard dispatch calling my number on a frequency that doesn't exist, using call signs for rangers who died years ago. I figured the guy had cracked from isolation. Happens to a lot of fire lookouts. Too much time alone can make your mind play tricks. I'd be different. I'd brought books, music, even a guitar to keep myself occupied. But by the end of my first week, I understood what he'd been writing about. The scratching started small. Just occasional sounds during the late night hours, like branches scraping against the tower supports. Normal enough in a place surrounded by trees. But branches don't scratch in patterns. They don't move methodically around the structure like something testing for weak points. I'd shine my flashlight down into the darkness but never saw anything. Just empty air and the shadowy outlines of trees far below. Then I found the claw marks. They appeared overnight on the wooden ladder leading up to the cabin. Deep gouges in the metal and wood, starting about 20 feet up and continuing to the platform. Whatever made them was strong enough to pierce steel and coordinated enough to climb, but that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was that the scratches were too high off the ground for any normal animal to reach, unless something had climbed partway up the tower to make them. I radioed headquarters the next morning, described what I'd found. The dispatcher's voice crackled through static. "Copy that, Pine View. We've had similar reports from other locations. Probably just a black bear with cubs. They can climb higher than most people realize. These don't look like bear claws," I insisted. "They're too long, too narrow, and there are what look like thumb marks. Just stay inside after dark, keep your radio on, and document anything unusual. We'll have someone check it out when they can get up there." But nobody came, and the scratching got worse. By the second week, it was happening every night, always starting around midnight, always following the same pattern. Slow scratching sounds moving around the tower supports, then up the ladder, then across the platform outside my cabin. I'd lie in my narrow bunk, flashlight ready, listening to something pace back and forth just outside the walls. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like breathing, deep, labored inhalations like something winded from climbing. The rational part of my mind kept insisting it was just animals, maybe a family of raccoons, mountain lions, though they rarely climbed structures this high. But when I checked the next morning, the scratches were always deeper, always in new places, and they were getting closer to the windows. 3 weeks in, I woke to find scratches in the glass itself. Long, parallel grooves that caught the morning light like cracks in ice. Something had been testing the windows, seeing if they'd break. That night, I decided to stay awake and confront whatever was harassing me. I positioned myself in the center of the cabin with my flashlight and a flare gun the Forest Service provided for emergencies. If it was just animals, the light and noise would scare them off. If it was something else, well, flares burn hot enough to set the whole forest ablaze. The scratching started right on schedule. Slow, methodical movement around the tower base, then up the ladder. I could hear each claw hooking into metal, a steady rhythm like someone climbing hand over hand. When the sounds reached the platform, I crept to the nearest window and peered out. At first, I saw nothing but darkness, then movement, something pale shifting at the edge of my vision. I switched on the flashlight and nearly dropped it. A figure crouched on the platform, just outside the circle of light, human-shaped but wrong in every detail. Too tall, too thin, joints bending at angles that hurt to look at. Its skin was the color of old bone, stretched tight over a frame that seemed barely held together. But the worst part was its face. It wore the features of my college girlfriend Emma. Her dark hair, her small nose, even the scar on her chin from a childhood accident. But the proportions were off, like someone had described her appearance from memory and gotten the details slightly wrong. The eyes were too large, the mouth too wide, the expression too eager. When our eyes met through the glass, it smiled. Emma's smile, but with too many teeth. "Let me in," it said in Emma's voice. "I'm cold out here. I've been looking for you for so long." I stumbled backward, heart hammering. Emma was 3,000 miles away in Boston, working at a law firm. We'd broken up 2 years ago and barely stayed in touch. "Please," the thing continued, pressing its face against the window. "I drove all this way to see you. Don't you miss me? Don't you love me anymore?" Its breath fogged the glass, leaving streaks that looked like claw marks. I raised the flare gun with shaking hands. "You're not Emma. Emma doesn't know where I am. Nobody knows where I am." The thing's smile faltered, then widened impossibly. When it spoke again, Emma's voice carried an undertone like grinding stone. "I know everything about you, Tommy. I know you dream about me. I know you regret letting me go. I know you're lonely up here, all by yourself in this little box in the sky. It was right about the loneliness, right about the dreams. But Emma had never called me Tommy. She'd always used my full name, Thomas. Let me in, it repeated. And now there were others behind it, more figures emerging from the darkness, all wearing faces I recognized. My mother, my brother Jake, my old roommate Chris, all slightly wrong, all smiling too widely. We've been worried about you, my mother's voice said. Living up here all alone isn't healthy. Come down and we'll take you home. Don't be scared. Jake added, we just want to help. They surrounded the platform, pressing against the windows, their breath clouding the glass. A chorus of familiar voices begging me to open the door, to trust them, to let them inside where it was warm and safe. I fired the flare gun into the air. The red light exploded above the tower, casting everything in hellish crimson. The figures recoiled, shielding their eyes and making sounds like tearing fabric. In the flare's glow, I could see their true forms, elongated shadows that bent and twisted like smoke, wearing stolen faces like masks. They retreated to the platform's edge but didn't leave entirely, just waited at the border of light and darkness, watching me with eyes that reflected the dying flare like animal eyes. We'll be back, Emma's voice called as the flare guttered out. We know where you live now. We know you're sent. You can't stay in there forever. The platform fell silent, but I could feel them out there, waiting. I spent the rest of the night huddled in the center of the cabin, radio clutched in my hands. But when I tried to call for help, all I got was static. Or worse, familiar voices speaking from frequencies that shouldn't exist. Tommy, this is your mother. Why haven't you called? We're worried sick. Pineview, this is dispatch. We're sending a helicopter to evacuate you. Just come down to the clearing and wait for pickup. Thomas, it's Emma. I'm at the base of your tower. The ladder's broken. Can you throw down a rope? Lies. All of them, but so perfectly crafted, using exactly the words and phrases these people would use. If I hadn't seen the things wearing their faces, I might have believed. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. When the sun finally rose, I found the platform empty except for new scratch marks. Deep gouges in the wooden planking that spelled out words, my full name, my home address, the names of everyone I cared about. They knew everything about me, had somehow crawled inside my memories and stolen the faces of everyone I loved. I lasted 2 more days, 2 more nights of voices calling from the darkness, of figures wearing familiar faces pressed against the windows. Each time they got bolder, more convincing. They'd learned from their mistakes, refined their mimicry until it was nearly perfect. On the final night, they sent my dead father. He'd passed away when I was 12, and seeing his face again, even knowing it wasn't really him, broke something inside me. When he begged me to open the door, when he said he'd missed me and was proud of the man I'd become, I actually reached for the handle. That's when I knew I had to leave. I abandoned the lookout at first light, hiking down the mountain with just a backpack and the clothes on my back. It took me 8 hours to reach the nearest road, another 4 to flag down a passing ranger. The official report listed my departure as a medical emergency. Acute stress reaction brought on by isolation. They found a replacement fire lookout within the week, someone with more experience and better psychological screening. He lasted 3 days. The tower sits empty now, considered too remote and dangerous to staff. But sometimes, late at night when the wind is right, hikers report hearing voices calling from the darkness up there. Familiar voices, speaking words of love and comfort. If you ever find yourself alone in the deep woods and hear someone you love calling your name, remember this. The people who truly care about you will never ask you to abandon safety to reach them. They'll find another way. They'll wait for daylight. The things in the darkness, though, they're hungry. and they'll wear any face, speak any words, promise anything to get you to come closer. Trust your instincts. Trust the wrongness you feel when something familiar doesn't quite fit. And remember that love doesn't have claws. Sweet dreams, everyone. And maybe subscribe if you want to hear more tales from the places where civilization ends and something else begins. The hitchhiker looked exactly like my missing sister, except she'd been dead for 3 years. And something about her smile made my skin crawl like she was wearing Lisa's face but had forgotten how to use it properly. I need to start at the beginning, back when this was supposed to be a healing road trip across Montana. My therapist thought it would help with the grief and guilt I'd been carrying since Lisa disappeared. Take some time alone, drive the scenic routes, process my emotions in nature's cathedral. What bullshit. But I was desperate enough to try anything. 3 years of therapy, medication, and support groups hadn't dulled the pain of losing my twin sister. She'd vanished during a solo camping trip in Glacier National Park. No trace, no evidence. Just her abandoned campsite and a search that turned up nothing. The official conclusion was animal attack, body carried off by scavengers. But I knew better. Lisa was an experienced outdoors woman, careful and prepared. She wouldn't have been taken by surprise by anything natural, so I planned a route through the same wilderness where she disappeared, hoping maybe I'd find answers, or closure, or at least some way to stop seeing her face every time I closed my eyes. The first 2 days were actually peaceful. I drove the winding mountain highways, stopped at scenic overlooks, even hiked a few of the trails Lisa had mentioned in her last text messages. It felt like being close to her again, following in her footsteps. But on day 3, driving a lonely stretch of highway 30 miles from the nearest town, I saw her, standing on the shoulder of the road with her thumb out, wearing the same hiking clothes she'd been wearing when she disappeared. Same blonde ponytail, same olive green backpack, same confident posture that said she could handle anything the world threw at her. My heart stopped, literally stopped for what felt like several seconds before hammering back to life. I slammed on the brakes so hard my car skidded sideways across the asphalt. When I looked back, she was walking toward me with that easy stride I remembered so well. But something was wrong with her walk. Too fluid, like her joints bent in places they shouldn't. And her smile. God, her smile was all wrong. Lisa had always smiled with her whole face, eyes crinkling at the corners, slight gap between her front teeth visible. This smile was just mouth, too wide, too eager, like someone who'd seen pictures of smiling but never actually felt happy. "Hey, stranger," she said as she approached the car. Lisa's voice exactly, but with an odd rhythm to it. "Thanks for stopping. I've been walking for hours." I sat frozen behind the wheel, mind reeling. This was impossible. Hallucination brought on by stress and grief. Had to be, but she looked so real. I could see the familiar freckles across her nose, the small scar on her chin from when we'd crashed our bikes as kids. Even the way she held her head slightly tilted when she spoke. "Are you okay?" she asked, leaning down to peer through the passenger window. "You look like you've seen a ghost." That's when I noticed her eyes. They were Lisa's eyes. Same green color, same long lashes, but they didn't blink. Not once during our entire conversation. Just stared with predatory intensity, like something studying prey. "You're not real," I whispered. Her smile widened impossibly. "Of course I'm real. I'm your sister. Don't you recognize me?" She opened the passenger door and slid into the seat before I could react. The smell that came with her nearly made me vomit. Something rotten and wild, like roadkill left in the Sunday. "Drive," she said pleasantly. "We have so much catching up to do." My hands shook as I put the car in gear. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but where could I go? And what if this really was Lisa somehow? What if she'd been lost in the wilderness for 3 years, living rough, changed by trauma. Where have you been? I managed to ask as we drove deeper into the mountains. Around, she said, staring straight ahead. Exploring. Learning things. Did you know there are places in these woods where reality gets thin? Places where things slip through from somewhere else? Her voice had that same odd cadence, like she was reciting lines from a script. Lisa, what happened to you? Everyone's been looking. I've been looking. She turned to face me then, and I had to fight not to swerve off the road. Her head rotated too far, nearly 180 degrees, vertebrae crackling audibly. I found something better than being human, she said. Or rather, it found me. Do you want to see what I've become? Before I could answer, her face began to change. Skin rippling like water, bones reshaping beneath the surface. For a moment, I saw something else underneath. Something with too many teeth and eyes that reflected light like a nocturnal predator. Then she was Lisa again, smiling that awful smile. Just kidding, she said, laughing with Lisa's laugh. You should see your face right now. You always were easy to scare, but I'd seen what I'd seen. This wasn't my sister. This was something wearing her skin. Pull over here, she said, pointing to a dirt road that disappeared into dense forest. There's something I want to show you. No. The word came out stronger than I felt. I'm taking you to the police station. They need to know you're alive. Her expression darkened. When she spoke again, Lisa's voice carried an undertone like growling dogs. That wasn't a request, brother. Pull over. Now. You're not my sister. I pressed harder on the accelerator. Lisa never called me brother. She always used my name. The thing wearing Lisa's face snarled, revealing rows of pointed teeth that definitely didn't belong in a human mouth. Clever boy, it hissed, but not clever enough. It lunged across the center console, claws that had emerged from Lisa's fingernails raking at my face. I jerked the steering wheel hard right, sending us into a skid that ended with the car sliding sideways into a ditch. When I came to, my forehead was bleeding and the passenger seat was empty. The door hung open, hinges bent like something had ripped it off from the inside. I stumbled out of the car, head spinning, and found tracks in the soft earth beside the road. They started as human footprints, Lisa's size 7 hiking boots. But after a few steps, they changed, became something with pads and claws, something that left scratches in the dirt as it walked. The tracks led into the forest. I should have driven away right then. Should have flagged down help and reported what happened. Instead, I followed the trail into the woods, drawn by the desperate hope that my real sister was out there somewhere, being held by whatever had taken her form. The tracks were easy to follow at first, pressed deep into the forest floor. But as I went deeper into the trees, they became more erratic, sometimes human, sometimes animal, sometimes something in between, and I began to hear voices, Lisa's voice, calling my name from different directions, begging for help, crying in pain, promising to explain everything if I'd just come a little closer. But I also heard other voices, my parents, my ex-girlfriend Sarah, friends from college, all calling out, all claiming to be lost, all asking me to find them. The voices multiplied as darkness fell, becoming a chorus of familiar people pleading for rescue. But they came from too many directions, moved too quickly between locations, and underneath each voice was that same wrongness, like hearing a recording played at slightly the wrong speed. I pressed on, following the beam of my phone's flashlight, until I reached a clearing where the trees formed an almost perfect circle. In the center was a massive pine that had to be centuries old, its trunk thick enough that 6 people couldn't wrap their arms around it, and nailed to the bark, about 8 feet up, were dozens of photographs. I recognized them immediately. Pictures from Lisa's camera, the one that had never been found. Photos from her final camping trip, documenting her journey into the wilderness. But these weren't normal vacation snapshots. They showed her being stalked. In the background of every image, barely visible in shadows and tree lines, were figures watching her. Tall, emaciated shapes that seemed to shift between human and animal forms. As the photos progressed chronologically, the figures got bolder, closer. The final photo showed Lisa asleep in her tent, with one of the creatures crouched just outside, its hand pressed against the fabric wall. "She took such beautiful pictures," Lisa's voice said behind me. I spun around to find her standing at the edge of the clearing. But now she wasn't alone. There were others with her. A dozen figures wearing faces I recognized. My parents, my friends, people I'd loved and lost. All of them watching me with those unblinking predator eyes. "We've been waiting for you," my mother's voice said from something that looked like her but moved wrong. "Lisa told us so much about you. How much you loved her. How guilty you felt about her disappearance. She died calling your name," my father added, his face a mask of paternal disappointment. "Where were you when she needed you?" They formed a circle around me, these stolen faces speaking words designed to cut deep, and part of me wanted to believe them, wanted to accept the guilt and pain they offered, but anger flared through the grief. These things had killed my sister, taken her life, stolen her face, and now they were using her memory to hurt me. "You want to know where I was when Lisa needed me?" I shouted at the thing wearing her face. I was 300 miles away, living my own life, because that's what normal siblings do. They don't hover over each other every second. The false Lisa's smile faltered. "And you know what else?" I continued, pulling out my phone and switching on the video camera. "Lisa would never try to make me feel guilty about her choices. She'd tell me it wasn't my fault and to stop being an idiot about it." The creatures recoiled as the phone's light hit them, their stolen faces flickering like bad reception on a television. She'd also probably tell me to run like hell right about now. I bolted toward the tree line, crashing through undergrowth as inhuman shrieks erupted behind me. Branches tore at my clothes, roots caught my feet, but I kept running. The voices followed, but now they were angry, dropping the pretense of love and concern, revealing the hunger underneath. "Come back," Lisa's voice snarled from somewhere too close. "You can't leave me again. You can't abandon me like you did before." But I could hear the lie in it now. The thing wearing my sister's face didn't understand love or guilt or family bonds. It only understood hunger and the tools it could use to feed. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, finally collapsing beside a stream miles from the clearing. When dawn broke, I was alone except for the normal sounds of forest wildlife. It took me 6 hours to hike back to the road, another 3 to flag down a passing park ranger. I told him I'd been in a car accident, needed help getting my vehicle towed, left out the part about shape-shifting monsters wearing my sister's face. The car was still there, but someone, or something, had been inside. My belongings were scattered, photos torn from frames, personal items arranged in patterns I didn't recognize, but they'd left one thing behind: Lisa's camera, sitting on the dashboard with a note attached. She tasted like love and regret. It said in handwriting that looked almost like Lisa's, "Just like you will." I've moved twice since then, changed my phone number, even considered changing my name, but I know they're still out there, still wearing her face, still calling my name from dark places, promising reunion and forgiveness. Sometimes I catch glimpses of Lisa in crowds, always just at the edge of my vision. When I turn to look directly, she's gone, but I feel those predator eyes watching, waiting for the moment when grief overcomes caution. The hardest part isn't the fear, it's the hope. because part of me still wants to believe that maybe, somehow, my real sister is out there, that the thing I met wasn't just a perfect imitation, but Lisa herself, changed by whatever took her. That hope will probably get me killed someday, but until then, I keep driving those lonely mountain roads, looking for answers I'm terrified to find. If you ever lose someone in the deep wilderness and later see them hitchhiking on empty highways, remember this. The people we love don't come back from the dead. They don't hunt us through dark forests wearing our memories like weapons. But something else does. Something hungry. Something that knows exactly which faces will make us lower our guard. Don't stop for hitchhikers who look too familiar. Don't follow voices calling from the darkness, no matter how much you've missed them. And if you enjoyed this nightmare fuel from the back roads of America, hit that notification bell. Because the highway to hell has plenty of stories left to tell, and I'm just getting started. My son's imaginary friends started leaving real footprints in the mud around our campsite, and they were getting bigger every night. Like something was growing as it fed on my boy's trust. This whole mess started because I wanted to be a good father. Jake had just turned 8, and I thought it was time for his first real camping trip. Father-son bonding, teaching him outdoor skills, all that traditional masculinity stuff my own dad never bothered with. After the divorce, I was desperate to prove I could handle single parenthood, so I planned a week-long camping trip to the Bridger-Teton National Forest in Wyoming, remote enough to feel like real wilderness, but with established campsites and marked trails. Safe adventure for a city kid who'd never spent a night away from electricity and running water. Jake was excited at first. Spent weeks preparing, packing and repacking his little backpack, asking endless questions about bears and wolves and whether we'd see any Indians. I explained that Native Americans still lived in the area but weren't the Hollywood version he'd seen in movies. What I didn't know was that some of the old stories were true. The first 2 days went perfectly. We hiked during the day, fished in a clear mountain stream, cooked hot dogs over the campfire. Jake adapted to outdoor life faster than I'd expected, showing none of the homesickness I'd worried about. But on the 3rd night, he started talking about his new friend. "Tommy, can I tell you about the man who visits me when you're asleep?" I was cleaning our dinner dishes in the stream, half listening to his chatter. Kids say weird stuff all the time, especially when they're tired and overstimulated. "What man, buddy?" "He comes to my tent after you go to sleep. He's really tall and thin, and he knows lots of stories about the old days. He told me about when his people used to hunt buffalo here." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "Jake, there's no man visiting you at night. You were dreaming." "No, I wasn't. He's real. He even knows your name, calls you Tommy just like I do. He says you're a good father, but you worry too much." I knelt down to Jake's eye level, studying his face for signs of deception. But he looked completely sincere, the way kids do when they're telling the absolute truth as they understand it. "What does this man look like?" "Really tall, like basketball player tall, and skinny. His clothes are old-fashioned, like in the museum, leather pants and a shirt with beads on it. Oh, and he has long black hair and braids. Classic Hollywood Indian description." Jake was probably just mixing camping with whatever Western movies he'd seen at his mother's house. "And he talks to you about what?" "Stories mostly. About how his people lived here before white men came. About the animals and plants and spirits in the forest. He's teaching me to track animals by their footprints." I decided to play along, see where this went. "That sounds interesting. Maybe tomorrow you can show me what you've learned." Jake beamed. He said you might want to learn too. He likes you even though you're not from here. That night, I lay awake in my own tent, listening. Jake's tent was maybe 10 feet away, close enough that I'd hear any disturbance. But except for normal forest sounds, owls, rustling leaves, distant coyote calls, everything was quiet. Around 3 in the morning, I heard Jake talking softly to someone. I unzipped my tent as quietly as possible and peered out. Jake's tent glowed faintly from his battery-powered lantern, and I could see his shadow sitting up, apparently having a conversation. My dad works in an office building downtown. It's really tall, with lots of windows. Jake was saying. A deeper voice responded, too muffled by the tent fabric for me to make out words. But there was definitely someone in there with him. I grabbed my flashlight and hunting knife, crept toward Jake's tent. The conversation stopped as I approached. "Jake, you okay in there, buddy?" "Yeah, Dad. I'm fine. Just talking too." Oh, he's gone now. I unzipped his tent and looked inside. Jake sat alone in his sleeping bag, lantern casting dancing shadows on the nylon walls. No sign anyone else had been there. "Who were you talking to?" "My friend. But he left when he heard you coming. He's shy around grown-ups." I searched the entire tent, checked for tears in the fabric, examined the ground outside for footprints. Nothing, but Jake's description of his conversation suggested he'd been talking about our life back home. He details an imaginary friend shouldn't know. "Jake, I need you to tell me the truth. Has someone really been visiting you?" He nodded solemnly. "Every night since we got here. He says his name is Tall Walker, and he used to live in these mountains before they became a park." Tall Walker. Not exactly subtle, but Native American names often described physical characteristics or skills. What else does he tell you? He says there are others like him who never left when their people were forced onto reservations. They stayed in the deep places, keeping the old ways alive. He says I have a good spirit and he wants to teach me things. I spent the rest of the night awake, watching Jake's tent from my own, but I never saw or heard anything suspicious. The next morning, Jake insisted on showing me what Tall Walker had taught him about tracking. He led me to a muddy area near the stream where animal prints were clearly visible. "See, Dad? These are deer tracks, and those are from a raccoon family. And these big ones." He pointed to a set of prints that made my blood run cold. "These are from Tall Walker." The footprints were massive, at least size 14, with an unusual pattern to the tread. They looked human, but wrong somehow. Too long and narrow, with what appeared to be claw marks at the toe impressions. "Jake, these aren't human footprints." "Yes, they are. Tall Walker has really big feet because he's so tall." He showed me how to tell the difference between bear paws and human feet. I followed the prints around our campsite. They circled both tents multiple times, approaching within a few feet of where we slept. In some places, the impressions were so deep they suggested someone much heavier than any normal person. But the disturbing part was how the prints changed. Near the edge of camp, they looked almost human. Closer to the tents, they became more elongated, with deeper claw marks, as if whatever made them was transforming as it walked. "Jake, I want you to stay close to me today, okay? No wandering off by yourself." "Why? Are you scared of Tall Walker?" "I'm not scared. I just want to make sure you're safe." That afternoon, while Jake napped in his tent, I hiked to the nearest ranger station. The ranger on duty was a weathered woman in her 50s who looked like she'd spent her entire career in these mountains. "I'm having some issues at my campsite," I began carefully. "My son thinks someone's been visiting him at night. I found some unusual tracks." Her expression grew serious immediately. "What kind of tracks?" I described what I'd seen, the size and shape and how they seemed to change around our camp. She listened without interruption, then pulled out a thick folder from her desk. "Mr. Johnson, I need to ask you some questions. Has your son mentioned anything about learning traditional stories or tracking skills?" "How did you?" "Yes, he has." She opened the folder, revealing dozens of incident reports dating back years. Missing campers, abandoned campsites, children found wandering alone with no memory of how they'd gotten separated from their families. "We've been tracking a pattern of incidents in this area for over a decade. Always involves children between 6 and 12 years old. Always starts with reports of an imaginary friend who claims to be teaching them about Native American culture. My hand started shaking. What are you saying? There's something in these woods that targets children. We don't know exactly what it is, but it's not human. It uses the appearance and mannerisms of traditional Native Americans to gain trust, but the descriptions never quite match any real tribal customs or dress. She showed me photographs from abandoned campsites. Personal belongings left behind, tents intact, no signs of struggle, just missing children, and those same unusual footprints circling the camps. Most of the children are never found. The few we do recover are usually discovered miles away, confused and dehydrated, with gaps in their memory. They all tell similar stories about a tall, thin man who promised to teach them ancient secrets. Jesus Christ. What am I supposed to do? Pack up immediately. Get your son away from here tonight. And whatever you do, don't let him wander off alone, especially after dark. I drove back to our campsite like a man possessed, mind racing with terrible possibilities. Jake was sitting by the cold fire pit, drawing in the dirt with a stick. Hey buddy, how was your nap? Good. Tall Walker came to visit while you were gone. He's excited because tonight's the last night before we leave, so he's going to show me something special. Ice filled my veins. What kind of special? He won't tell me. It's a surprise. But he said I need to meet him at the old lightning tree after you fall asleep. I knew the tree he meant. A massive dead pine about half a mile from camp, struck by lightning years ago and left as a twisted black skeleton against the sky. Jake, we're not going to meet Tall Walker tonight. In fact, we're packing up and leaving right now. His face fell. But Dad, he's my friend. He'll be waiting for me. Your friend isn't what you think, he island. He's dangerous. Jake started crying, the kind of frustrated sobs that come when adults don't understand something important. He's not dangerous. He likes me. He says I'm special, that I have the spirit of a warrior. Classic predator language. Targeting a child's need to feel unique and valued. I packed our gear as quickly as possible while Jake sulked and complained. But as we loaded the car, I realized we had a problem. In my rush to pack, I'd gotten turned around. The dirt road back to the main highway looked different in the fading light, and I couldn't remember which direction we'd come from. Dad, you're going the wrong way, Jake said from the back seat. Tall Walker showed me all the trails. The road home is that way. He pointed in the opposite direction from where I was driving. How would he know which way we came from? He knows everything about these mountains. He's been here longer than anyone. I stopped the car, studying the diverging paths in my headlights. Jake was probably right about the direction. Kids often have better spatial memory than adults. But following his advice meant trusting information from something that wanted to lure him into the forest. I chose the path that felt right to me, ignoring Jake's increasingly frantic protests. 20 minutes later, we were clearly lost. The road had deteriorated to barely more than a deer path, and my GPS showed no signal. Worse, it was now full dark, and the car's headlights revealed dense forest pressing in on all sides. Dad, we need to go back. Tall Walker said there are dangerous animals this way. We're not going back to meet your friend Jake. End of discussion. But even as I said it, I was starting to think he might be right about the directions. We'd been driving for over an hour without seeing any familiar landmarks. That's when I saw the figure standing in the road ahead, tall and thin, exactly as Jake had described. Long black hair, traditional clothing, standing perfectly still in the glare of my headlights. But there was something wrong with its proportions. Arms too long, legs too thin, head tilted at an unnatural angle. I slammed on the brakes, car skidding to a stop maybe 20 feet from the figure. "It's Tall Walker," Jake shouted excitedly. "He came to find us." The thing in the road turned its head toward our car. In the harsh LED light, I could see its face was wrong. Features that looked human from a distance but became grotesque up close. Skin stretched too tight over angular bones. Eyes that reflected light like an animal's. A smile with too many teeth. It raised one impossibly long arm and beckoned for us to approach. Dad. He wants us to come talk to him. Stay in the car, Jake. Do not get out of this car no matter what happens. I put the car in reverse, but before I could back away, the thing moved. Faster than anything human. It covered the distance between us in 3 fluid bounds, landing on the hood with a metallic thud that dented the metal. Up close, its costume looked like someone's idea of traditional Native American dress rather than anything authentic. Generic Hollywood Indian stereotypes, but worn by something that clearly wasn't human. It pressed its face against the windshield, studying us with predatory interest. When it smiled, I could see rows of pointed teeth that definitely didn't belong in any human mouth. "Tommy," it said in a voice like wind through dry leaves. "Why do you keep the boy from his lessons?" Jake was bouncing excitedly in the back seat, completely oblivious to the horror crouched on our car. "Hi, tall walker." Dad was scared and drove the wrong way. "But you found us anyway." The creature's smile widened as it looked at Jake. "The boy has great potential," it continued, still addressing me. "Strong spirit. Brave heart. He would make a fine addition to my collection." "Your what?" Instead of answering, it pressed one clawed hand against the windshield. The safety glass began to crack under the pressure, spider-webbing outward from where it touched. I floored the accelerator in reverse, hoping to throw the thing off balance, but it clung to the hood like a giant spider, claws digging into the metal. "Dad, why are you trying to hurt Tall Walker?" Jake demanded. "He's my friend." The creature laughed, a sound like breaking branches. "The boy understands. Children always understand before their parents poison them with fear." It raised its other hand, claws extended, and brought them down toward the windshield. The glass exploded inward, filling the car with glittering fragments. I grabbed my hunting knife from the console and slashed at its reaching arm. The blade bit deep, releasing a smell like rotting meat. The creature shrieked and recoiled, black blood spattering the dashboard. "Now you've made me angry," it hissed. "The boy comes with me whether you approve or not." It lunged through the broken windshield, claws reaching for Jake. I threw myself sideways, putting my body between them, feeling those claws rake across my shoulder and back. "Leave my son alone." The pain cleared my head, focused my purpose. This thing had been grooming Jake, gaining his trust, planning to take him. Everything the ranger had told me about missing children crystallized into pure fury. I drove the hunting knife deep into its side, twisting the blade. It screamed again, a sound that shattered what remained of the windshield, and retreated through the opening. But it didn't go far, just crouched on the hood, studying me with new respect. "You fight well for a soft city man," it admitted. "But you cannot protect him forever. I am patient. I will wait." "Dad, why did you hurt him?" Jake was crying now, confused by the violence. He was just trying to say goodbye. The creature's expression softened as it looked at Jake. "Do not fear, little warrior. Your father simply does not understand our ways. When you are older, when you can make your own choices, you will come find me, and I will teach you all the secrets your people have forgotten." It leaped from the hood into the forest, disappearing into the darkness faster than my eyes could follow. I sat there for several minutes, bleeding and shaking, while Jake sobbed in the back seat. Eventually, I managed to get the car turned around and retrace our route back toward the main road. We didn't talk during the drive home. Jake was devastated at losing his friend, and I was processing the fact that something inhuman had been planning to abduct my son. The ranger had been right. This thing, whatever it was, used the appearance of Native Americans to gain children's trust, then lured them away from their families. A perfect predator strategy. using cultural respect and curiosity as weapons. It took weeks of therapy before Jake stopped asking when we could go camping again so he could see Tall Walker. Even longer before he understood that his friend had been something dangerous wearing a friendly mask. But the worst part was that I could see the creature had planted seeds in Jake's mind. Ideas about ancient wisdom and forgotten secrets. About how adults didn't understand the important things. Even knowing the truth. Part of Jake still believed Tall Walker had been trying to help him. That's how these things work. They don't just hunt children. They corrupt them first. Turn them against their own parents. Make them willing participants in their own disappearance. Jake's 18 now, about to start college. He doesn't remember most of the details from that camping trip, but sometimes I catch him staring out at the forest with a longing expression, like he's listening for a voice calling from the deep woods. I pray he never answers it. If you have children and you're planning wilderness trips, remember this. Not everything that looks human actually island. Especially things that seem too interested in gaining your child's trust, too eager to teach them ancient secrets or traditional ways. Real elders from indigenous communities don't skulk around campsites at night targeting random children. They work within their communities, with proper introductions and family connections. But the things that hunt in the deep woods, they'll wear any face, claim any heritage, tell any story that gets them closer to their prey. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong about your child's new friend, it probably island. And hey, if these stories are keeping you awake at night, maybe hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because the monsters in our world are real enough, and they're always looking for the next trusting child to add to their collection. Sleep tight, everyone, and keep your kids close.